Greetings. Welcome to the Captive Desk. I came across an ICR video, and surprise, it irritated me watching it. Most creationists are either not scientists or are not speaking about the field they have a degree in. This creationist is and does. So I am going to give a few opinions as a layperson about what the zoologist has to say versus what the rest of academia has to say. So here goes.
Welcome to the Creation Podcast, the show where we discuss the science that confirms Scripture. I'm your host, Lauren, and I have with me today ICR zoologist, Dr. Frank Sherwin. So good to have you with us today, Dr. Sherwin.
So good to be here.
So we have Lauren, who is listed as a media person on the ICR bio page, and we have Frank Sherwin, a zoologist. According to Wiki, Frank Sherwin has a BA in biology from Western State College, Colorado, and an MA in zoology, University of Northern Colorado. He is an employee of the Institute for Creation Research. So Frank has a degree in biology, so he at least knows things like a basic understanding of biology, right? Let's see what Lauren asks Frank about and what Frank has to say.
We're going to specifically focus in on mammals. So, according to evolutionary thinking, they explain away the variety of mammals that we see by claiming that natural processes caused all of them to evolve and change over vast eons of time, and that's where all the variety that we see comes from, according to them.
Biologists explain the diversity of life with the theory of evolution, including the diversity among more than 5,500 mammal species via pressures that are selected for. Fossils and genetics are used to confirm relationships between species and all of life on this planet.
God did not use evolutionary processes. He created after their kind. Well, with that is as understanding as a basis, a foundation for the creation model.
The zoologist that studied biology says God did not use evolutionary processes. Kind is not a scientific term, Frank, nor can creationists define what it means in a way to classify animals like science does. The creationist model is God did it. That's the weakest model you can have, as it isn't good for anything.
We see that animals have always been animals, and multicellular animals in particular.
Yes, animals are always animals, or they wouldn't be called animals. They may be called something like, plants or bacteria, maybe protista or fungi. Frank must have missed those biology classes, or he just wants to say something right from the start to bother me. Scientist or not, of course an animal is always an animal, or it wouldn't be an animal. What kind of nonsense is that, Frank? That's like saying a chair is always a chair. Yeah, that's why it's called a chair. Words describe things, Frank.
Such as the reptiles and the mammals and the birds and the amphibians and such. And so that's exactly what we find today. What we do not find are the links that would link these major groups of animals together. And we would like to say that the missing links are missing.
Imagine that.
And so we don't see macroevolution. We just see minor variation within those created kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Such as reptiles and birds and amphibians. Frank, are you using words to describe different types of animals? What happened to animals have always been animals, yet you can use other words to better describe them? Science doesn't use missing link. It uses transitional forms, and many transitional species have been found in the fossil record, and why creationists say missing link and not transitional fossils, because if you look up transitional fossils, you will get a list of them, and creationists don't want anyone doing that. So I will. And what do you know? Here's a list of transitional species, and the list goes on and on and on. Seems to be plenty of transitional species, Frank. Frank and Lauren like to have a good laugh about there not being phylogenetic trees. Yes, there are phylogenetic trees, Frank, the biologist, zoologist. You didn't know that, or are you being dishonest? Oh, cripes, Frank. Macroevolution, really? Evolution is evolution. Micro and macro are just a matter of generations. If you accept microevolution, you accept the mechanisms of evolution. And you do accept macroevolution, as there would have to be super-duper macroevolution after your Noah's flood story to produce the many species today that you will say didn't all fit on one boat, but rather they speciated after the flood that never happened that you believe in. You can't get any more macro than a new species, Frank, and new species have been observed in real time and in the fossil record coming into existence. This is creationist double talketh with forked tongueth, and it really bugs me when it's a scientist in the field that should know these things. Or he does, and worse yet, is being dishonest about them.
And so evolutionary naturalism has rejected creation, has rejected the Bible, and therefore they're in the uncomfortable position of having to say the strange idea of evolution that ever so many millions of years ago on this primal planet, supposedly, you had inorganic non-life becoming organic life. Now, that's a pretty neat trick, and that's a very big problem for evolutionary naturalists.
Science does not set out to disprove God's stories. God's stories can be disproved by science, giving us a better understanding of the natural world. It's not an uncomfortable position for science to explain things. That's what science does. It's the creationists that are in an uncomfortable position, as science has never found a magic molecule or the magic goo that gives rise to life nor the evolution of life. Evolution is not a strange idea to all the biologists in the world that didn't miss too many biology classes like you did, Frank. And here we go with deflecting away from evolution and mammals and bringing up abiogenesis. Doesn't matter how life started, Frank. It's been evolving ever since. It's not a problem, and neat tricks are what you think you're pulling by using terms like naturalists, and that they are in an uncomfortable position. And I doubt you know what naturalists means. You are talking nonsense, Frank, and you are showing you should probably give back that biology degree because you didn't learn anything in those classes, it seems. Or you are terrible at being a scientist. Which is it, Frank?
So when we look to the fossil record, again, we don't find that at all. As a matter of fact, in one of the lowest layers of the sedimentary rock units that we call the geologic column, we find a sudden explosion of complex life that we call the Cambrian explosion.
Frank is going to throw out the Cambrian explosion and misrepresent it. This is the kind of stuff that bothers me, Frank. You are either dishonest or are one of the worst biologists, zoologists ever, and should not be speaking about either topic. The Cambrian explosion lasted tens of millions of years, and was preceded by the Precambrian that makes up 80% of the geological record, spanning back 3 billion years to the oldest fossils found in it. That's a lot of time for life to evolve before and during the Cambrian, Frank. But I guess Frank missed those days in biology classes too. I am not trying to insult the school. My guess is they taught biology. Frank just refused to learn it. And or he is being dishonest for a paycheck, as a sellout, and as an insult to his peers with biology degrees and the educational institutions.
Now, there's somebody else that knew about that and who was not a creationist, and his name was Charles Darwin. He understood that the fossil record did not support his theory of evolution.
Say what?
Darwin realized while in South America that if there are giant sloths and no giant sloths living today, there would be intermediate fossils found. And they were. Darwin also discovered several species of extinct sloths in the fossil record that were unknown before. And Darwin predicted various transitional fossils in other species that should be found if his theory was correct. And some were found in his lifetime and others since. Ooh, Darwin. Ooh. Sorry, Lauren, but Frank's gotcha on Darwin is Frank being dishonest, or again, one of the worst biologists ever, and or really, really lazy at looking anything up, because it only takes me a matter of minutes to look Frank's claims up online to find they are all false. This is another thing creationists love to do, is attack Darwin with disinformation and quote mining, rather than just looking up what Darwin actually did or said, and that's being lazy and dishonest and shows they cannot refute what Darwin actually said. So they make things up. Let's look up what Darwin actually said. So Frank claims Darwin says there are no fossils backed up his theory. But in reality, while sailors on board the Beagle charted the coastal waters of South America, the actual purpose of the expedition, Darwin explored the shore and rambled inland on excursions that sometimes lasted weeks. The fossils he unearthed, some relatively fresh, other millions of years old, had tremendous significance in the history of science. Many of the species Darwin discovered in the fossils were previously unknown to science, including several giant ground sloths. But many of those animals were apparently extinct. But just as apparently related to species still living in the region, Darwin concluded the fossils were strong evidence for the transmutation or evolution of species. This evidence was all the more convincing to him because he had unearthed the fossils himself. He saw firsthand the fossils' geologic context, which enabled him to more easily infer how species had changed through time.
The first animal we're going to talk about is the beaver. What makes the beaver unique? A lot of us just think of kind of the teeth or maybe the old show back in the 60s or 50s, Leave It to Beaver. What makes the beaver unique?
I guess my mind is in a different place, Lauren, when I hear beaver. What makes the beaver unique, Frank?
Beavers are incredible animals, and before the flood, we found that beavers are very, very large. They're huge animals digging large burrows, but as we like to say, animals have always been animals, and the created kinds have always been the created kinds.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Beavers have always been beavers. Yes, Frank, or they wouldn't be called beavers. Beavers did used to be a lot larger, and dug burrows that evolved over time to building lodges, as there are ancestors to beavers that dug burrows. Animals have always been animals. Yes, Frank, we already covered this.
So this includes the rodents. Now, I enjoy studying rodents as a zoologist because rodents have always been rodents.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Rodents have always been rodents. Wow, you are brilliant, Frank. And the way you keep using that stupid argument over and over again is really amazing. Yes, a rodent is a rodent, or it wouldn't be called a rodent, Frank. Again, this doesn't take understanding of any science at all, just a basic grasp of language and how words work to describe things. Saying something is what it is obviously why it's called that, Frank.
That was published by 2 editors in 2015 entitled Evolution of the Rodents.
Some biologists put out a book about rodents called The Evolution of the Rodents. But you didn't read it, did you, Frank? Because those dumb biologists called rodents rodents, like everyone else does. You just said there is a book on the evolution of rodents, Then you say they can't explain the evolution of rodents nor the beaver. Well, let's look that up, Frank. So we have phylogenetic trees of rodents and beavers and many studies done on the evolution and the ancestors to rodents and beavers. Just got to look it up online, Frank. Here they are.
Hard for the evolutionist to paint an evolutionary tree of the evolution of rodents, which includes large rodents like the beaver.
Frank is being misleading again. Or he is incredibly incompetent and or really lazy, as this information is a few clicks away on the internet and can be source checked.
As a matter of fact, one evolutionist said, although intensively studied, the phylogenetic relationships, that is, the evolutionary relationships between the different groups of rodents, has been a matter of debate for over 150 years. So rodents have always been rodents. Beavers are just amazing with their ability to cut down trees using their very formidable teeth. And the teeth are kind of an orange color. Now, why is that? Well, it's due to iron deposits. So God has designed the teeth of beavers to have these iron deposits that cause the teeth to be very, very sharp, and beavers have no problem in cutting these trees down and doing what beavers do and building the dams and helping out with the ecosystems.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Phylogenetic trees change with new discoveries and are always a matter of debate as new species are found and how they fit into the bigger picture of over 8 million species into phylogenetic trees and their branches. Rodent teeth keep growing, so they chew to keep them ground down, or they grow into their brains and die. Cutting down trees and using them to build lodges and dams is a byproduct of their need to keep grinding down their teeth or they die. If that's great design in your book, you are none too bright, and neither is your designer in that book you get that nonsense from, Frank.
The beavers also belong to a group called the mammals. So they have hair, obviously, and mammary glands that give birth to live young. And Hickman and 4 other evolutionists writing in 2020 in a zoology textbook said that the fossil record is silent on the appearance of mammary glands of these rodents. And Cardong said in 2012 in his book on vertebrates, a university-level textbook, he said, and I quote, "The origin of lactation in mammals remains a complex issue." Well, complex indeed. They just simply don't know.
Beavers are mammals. Using words to describe things, Frank? What happened to animals are animals? The fossil record is silent on many soft tissues, like mammary glands, as they don't fossilize. Usually it's the bones that fossilize. Scientists simply don't know about mammary gland evolution, says Frank. Well, let's see. Lactation appears to be an ancient reproductive trait that predates the origin of mammals. The synapsid branch of the amniote tree that separated other taxa in the Pennsylvanian 310 million years ago, evolved a glandular rather than scaled integument. Repeated radiations of synapsids produced a gradual accrual of mammalian features. The mammary gland apparently derives from an ancestral apocrine-like gland that was associated with hair follicles. This association is retained by monotreme mammary glands and is evident as vestigial mammary hair during early ontogenetic development of marsupials. The dense cluster of mammopilosebaceous units that open unto a nippleless mammary patch in monotremes may reflect a structure that evolved to provide moisture and other constituents to permeable eggs. Mammary patch secretions were co-opted to provide nutrients to hatchlings, but some constituents, including lactose, may have been secreted by ancestral apocrine-like glands in early synapsids. Advanced Triassic therapsids, such as cynodonts almost certainly secreted complex, nutrient-rich milk, allowing a progressive decline in egg size and an increasingly ultrical state of the young at hatching. This is indicated by the very small body size, presence of epipubic bones, and limited tooth replacement in advanced cynodonts and early mammalia forms. Nipples that arose from the mammary patch rendered mammary hairs obsolete, while placental structures have allowed lactation to be truncated in living eutherians.
Let's just go ahead and define that. How would you define a mammal, just as we continue to talk about some of these animals?
Well, mammals are very, very unique and horribly complex creatures, of course.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Mammals are unique. Wow, that's an original idea you keep repeating that means nothing, as all species are unique, or they would all be the same. And that goes for different species of mammals, too. And hey, Frank, how are they unique if they are animals and have always been animals?
Now, people have mammalian traits or characteristics. I say that people are created in God's image, and so God has adorned us, if you will, with traits and characteristics of mammals.
Humans have the traits and characteristics that define us as mammals and as animals and vertebrates and primates, but humans are neither and both at the same time, Frank? You keep talking, but you aren't saying much that isn't nonsense. And as a biologist and a zoologist, you either didn't learn anything or you are being dishonest again, as that seems to be your modus operandi.
So a mammal is a vertebrate. It has a brain and spinal cord. They have mammary glands. They have hair, which is quite unique to mammals. And even blue whale has very subtle hairs on its belly. So they are also mammals. And of course, mammary glands undergoing lactation. And so all this is very, very complex and is unique to this group called the mammals.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Mammals that are animals have hair and lactate and have a spinal cord, just like humans. But humans are not mammals or animals. Yet a whale is because it has a few hairs left over from being a land animal. But that's not evolution, because Frank is an idiot that doesn't know any better, even after taking biology and zoology college-level courses that he apparently never went to and somehow was still given a degree in them, and why he works for where he can say all kinds of nonsense and get praise and paid for it, versus academia that dismisses creationists as pseudoscience pushers, otherwise known as being dishonest intentionally and willfully for money by fleecing the gullible.
And so we have to ask the question, where did mammals come from? And according to evolutionists, mammals have always been mammals, for example.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Mammals have always been mammals, because if they weren't mammals, they would be called something else. This is getting really old, and it's really stupid to say it and to keep repeating it, Frank. Mammals are mammals because they are mammals. No one is disputing that.
And when it comes to teeth, I just want to share something by an evolutionist who is an authority on teeth. He wrote this book in 2010. His name is Peter Ungar. Peter Ungar is no creationist, and Dr. Ungar said the details of when, where, why, and how teeth first appeared still elude consensus. But the point is that teeth have always been teeth, and this is none more true than when we look at the fossil record and see just a mass of teeth.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Teeth have always been teeth. Yes, Frank, if they weren't teeth, they wouldn't be called teeth. That's why they are called teeth. When, where, and how teeth appeared and evolved is a mystery. The scientists are all clueless, according to Frank, who knows all because he believes in a magic book with magic animals and magic plants and magic beings that answers everything as, it's magic. I am guessing science does know a few things about teeth, but let's check and see. The first occurrence of tooth-like structures is believed to be in the posterior pharynx of jawless fishes more than 500 million years ago. With the evolution of jawed vertebrates, teeth developed on oral jaws and helped to establish the dominance of gnathostomes on land and in water. Big surprise that Frank is being misleading again, or he is just plain the worst science communicator ever and shouldn't be in the position to be speaking on things he didn't learn in school and can't look up before doing this terrible interview. Because he doesn't care to have good information, he just wants to call scientists liars and dum-dums that don't know anything for yucks. So ICR keeps paying him, as he surely wouldn't be able to get a job as a scientist at any reputable agency.
Beaver are also unique in that they have fur that is really of two types. They have the large fur on the outside, and then they have more subtle, more fine fur on the skin itself. So it's two kinds of fur. Now, when it comes to fur or hair, we find that hair has always been hair.
Hair has always been hair, and fur is hair. So fur has always been fur. Unless it's humans, then they have hair. But humans are not animals or mammals that have fur or hair. Yet humans have hair, so they must be mammals and animals. Frank, this silly word salad argument of yours seems to be your bad answer to every question.
The evolutionary interpretation of the fossil record, where they have found traces of hair, they say it's 100% hair. And so even though it's allegedly millions of years old, and there's nothing simple about hair. Hair is very complex. It's just as complex, for example, as feathers. They show up complete and fully formed. And so we find that God has adorned various mammals with fur or hair, depending on what ecological system it's going to find itself in.
That's really interesting, too, because a lot of those who follow the evolutionary worldview, they think that creature's environment shaped them to have these features. But do you think that these creatures could have survived without these features already in place, even for a few generations?
Lauren is asking what many creationists ask. How did a species survive while waiting for things to evolve? Richard Dawkins was asked this. How do species survive waiting for organs or limbs, etc., to evolve? Now, how do you imagine an animal with no skin, bones, or organs that's waiting to evolve them? That's magic thinking, not evolution.
I had to come to terms with, how on earth did we function? And the heart, for example, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, and particularly, don't want to be too personal, but how do I take a leak if I have to wake up few million years to do that?
Wait a minute, I don't understand.
Well, if I was to go to the toilet,
Yes.
how did we evolve with the ability to release waste if we were waiting for certain organs to develop?
Well, no, it's not really like that.
I know it's a simple question, but I'm a simple man.
I mean, you don't wait millions of years. It all happens. There's a continual improvement going on all the time, continual changing. I mean, the way things work is different now from the way it used to be.
Let's move on to one that is my personal favorite. This is my favorite animal in the whole world. Let's talk about dogs. What are some special features that dogs have and just ways that it points to our creator?
Dogs. That's a good one. Dogs are a man's best friend, as they say, and dogs are just amazing. What can you say in just a few minutes about dogs? We're up to here, scientifically speaking, of dogs in the United States. We have untold millions of dogs, and they come in all shapes and all sizes. But what we want to emphasize is that dogs have always been dogs.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Once again, dogs are dogs, or they wouldn't be called dogs. This is not an argument that proves anything, but that you are very ignorant on purpose and very annoying, and why I had to address this video, because it bothered me so much that anyone that has had biology classes, much less someone with science degrees in biology and zoology, could say such idiotic things and repeat them like it's words of wisdom, when it's just idiotic word salad.
When we talk about dogs, we talk about the variety of dogs. And there's about 340 modern dog breeds out there. But what's amazing is they've only emerged within about 2 centuries.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I did not realize
340
that. Okay.
modern dog breeds, and only within about the last 2 centuries. So that's amazing. And so, we can breed varieties of dogs, but we always get dogs from the Mexican Chihuahua to the Great Dane and everything in between. And we don't have that kind of variation, for example, with cats, and nobody really knows why.
The Guinness Book of World Records recognizes Seleucus as their oldest dog breed, and notes the breed dates back to at least 329 BC. Yet Guinness also notes that cave paintings of dogs that look like Seleucus date back 9,000 years, which shows just how difficult deciphering the exact age of specific dog breeds can be. There were dogs being bred 3,000 years before you think the earth was even here, Frank. Frank says no one really knows why there are more breeds of dogs than cats. Well, let's look it up and see why. Because they don't come from a particularly social animal, you can't get a house cat to do much. Thus, whereas dogs have been bred to perform different tasks, cats have largely been bred for looks. The result being that there are more dog breeds than cat breeds. Seems it is known why, Frank. Just because you don't know much doesn't seem to apply to everyone, especially experts in their fields that actually study these things, or anyone that has mastered the complexity of the Google search engine.
But where dogs come from and how old various groups of dogs are is still a bit of a mystery. According to Science Daily, which is an evolutionary publication, they said that in 2020. So just a few years ago, they don't know where dogs come from or how old various groups of dogs are.
Say what?
There is archaeological evidence dogs were the first animals domesticated by humans more than 30,000 years ago. Recent molecular evidence shows that dogs are descended from the gray wolf, domesticated about 130,000 years ago. All dogs, Canis familiaris, are in fact direct descendants of the gray wolf, Canis lupus. Domestication, according to recent molecular evidence, suggests the process started 130,000 years ago, Frank. And we can look at the phylogenetic trees. You can see the genetic evidence. You can see all the dog breeds. You can see their families. And you can see they are all descended from the gray wolf. Dogs were not dogs. They used to be a gray wolf. Then they were dogs.
Now, I hasten to add that we're not criticizing the evolutionists for making this admission. As a matter of fact, we salute them. We salute
Intellectual
them
honesty.
for being intellectually honest and saying that they don't know, and that's fine. That's what science is about, is research. And we at the Institute for creation research. And so we like to research too, but we start at a very different foundation than that of the evolutionist. And so we know where dogs came from, and the evolutionists don't, and we're not, denigrating them on that. But it's very, very clear that dogs have always been dogs.
Mm-hmm. You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Your entire career has been about bad-mouthing scientists, and you are bad-mouthing them and lying about them and putting words into their mouths they never said. And when you say repeatedly they don't know anything about things they do know about and have published scientific papers about and have genetic and fossil evidence for, that is a Google search away for anyone that wants to know. You get paid off to pass off disinformation and lying about just about everything scientists say, Frank. Your phony spew about respecting scientists for their honesty is disgusting, Frank, and so are you. Maybe if you weren't one of the worst scientists ever, you would actually work as a scientist rather than sitting in an ICR cubicle writing nonsense disinformation under a statement of faith contract for an easy paycheck that doesn't require doing any research or even a simple Google search, as intellectual laziness is what creationists seem to excel at, along with willful disinformation peddling, grifting the gullible, and very little else, if anything.
And they will see that the evidence points towards dogs came from dogs because God created them as dogs. And they just keep making different kinds of dogs, but it's still dogs. And that's the case with every other animal we're talking about here. So this is really good so far. I'm excited about this. And of course, dogs are my favorite. So I especially enjoyed that part.
The evidence is that dogs descended from wolves about 130,000 years ago. But keep saying idiotic repeats like dogs are dogs, straight from turnips like ham and Hovens, rather than spending a few minutes with a textbook or scientific papers because you have a magic spell book that explains things better. So why bother, as grifting believers is so much easier and more profitable. And you can look at these phylogenetic trees, you can look them up yourself. To say that scientists do not know where dogs come from is wrong.
But the next animal is fun too, and I know that this is a favorite of a lot of people. What about elephants? What are some special features that elephants have, and how do they point us towards our Creator?
Well, elephants are one of the largest of the land animals, and they happen to be mammals. And elephants are called pachyderms, and it refers back to their skin. And elephants, first of all, are unique. They are very unique.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Wow, elephants are unique, you say? Well, that's a new argument, at least. Yeah, no, it's not. Once again, you irritating person, all species are unique, or they would be all the same. Saying different species are unique over and over is not evidence of God. It's overstating the obvious to anyone who has any idea how words work to describe things, like over 8 million different species, while you charlatans say they are all animals, that's it. But also use descriptive words out of the other side of your lying faces. You are quick to dismiss when you want to call scientists dum-dums that do not know anything about the fields they have spent their lives studying, in labs and in the field, while you sit in an ICR cubicle without a dictionary or internet access, writing up nonsense under contract to write up nonsense.
And so elephants are really a unique kind of a created creature.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat? You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Yes, they are unique. Unique, unique, unique. And you are unique as a scientist because you do not do any science, nor seem to remember anything you took in school, nor can you look up what words mean, or phylogenetic trees, or fossil and genetic evidence readily available online and in libraries, as you missed those days in biology and zoology classes too. Or you are being dishonest again. This is the same dumb argument apologists use to the point of making my brain cry. My religion is unique. Well, good for you. Says all religions as well, because they are unique too, or they would all be the same religion. Unique doesn't prove your religion is true. It doesn't prove science is wrong. It doesn't prove that you know better than. It is just an annoying word game of nonsense. It's irritating and bugs me to no end how anyone can think saying things that are unique is anything but overstating the obvious. Unless your intended audience you have already deemed none too bright to begin with and are easily fleeced. So why even put forth any effort with a decent argument?
Elephants have always been elephants.
Yes, elephants have always been elephants. If they weren't elephants, they wouldn't be called elephants. Why did you waste your time to get a degree in biology and zoology? You didn't learn anything. You talk like an idiot, and you have thoroughly annoyed me with your endless repeats of idiotic word salads, showing yourself as nothing but a grifter for ICR and their nonsense.
So the next one is another fun one, the next animal we're going to talk about. And so we are going to jump into our kangaroo discussion. You get it? That was for you, Frank. I know you love jokes, and that was a horrible one. But let's jump into kangaroos. So what are some of kangaroos' special features?
Well, obviously, kangaroos are very, very special. The larger kangaroos are called the red kangaroo, I believe. And they are unique only to Australia.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Unique, you say? Stop saying that, Frank. My bingo card of stupid things creationists say is full.
And so evolutionists want to make a big deal about that and say, well, why don't we find kangaroo fossils anywhere else? But looking at the creation model, we find that the Earth is only around 6,000 years old and that the flood occurred about 4,500 years ago. The ark landed on Mount Ararat that had kangaroos as well as dinosaurs and all the other animals. The ark landed at Mount Ararat. The animals got out months later and began to migrate. And so the kangaroos migrated, we believe, and we aren't sure because we can't go back in time, but they migrated from the Mount Ararat region to land of Australia through what we believe to be a land bridge.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know? Doesn't your Bible have all the answers? You keep saying you know all about animals from the Bible, yet you don't know about kangaroos from the Bible? Why not? Is it because kangaroos are not mentioned in the Bible? How can you talk about kangaroos, Frank, when your answer book doesn't mention them? The reason you get asked, where is the evidence that kangaroos traveled from Turkey to Africa to Australia and did not leave a trace, is a valid one you can't answer with magic kangaroos or a magic land bridge to Australia that does not and did not exist. As a land bridge in waters that average 3,741 meters or 12,274 feet deep would be the size of a mountain range, and yet there is nothing there. Almost like you are lying, Frank, or are just one of the worst scientists ever that no one should listen to, and why you are paid as one can only be, as I see it, because ICR is a dishonest organization peddling disinformation to the gullible for easy money, and you, Frank, have no honor or decency in you, and they said, you are our guy.
Years, this is decades ago, they were following a kangaroo as it was bounding along, and it was going along without breaking a sweat, basically, mile after mile after mile, and it went onto the beach there, and I forget what section of Australia it was, and went into the water and started swimming. Without breaking stride or anything, and unfortunately, he was overcome by sharks, and so.
So no land bridges and no swimming 10,000 kilometers to Australia, as no populations of animals could or have ever done, ever. And Frank says even venturing into shark-infested waters gets them eaten. Your answers to how kangaroos got to Australia are as terrible as the rest of your idiotic arguments, Frank. But kangaroos are unique. So that means something to Frank, I guess, because he keeps saying unique and probably will keep saying it.
Kangaroos have always been kangaroos. There is no evolutionary precursor.
And that's why they can't find one.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
absolutely.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Kangaroos have always been kangaroos. Oh, cripes, Frank. You and Lauren fell off the turnip truck. Of course kangaroos have always been kangaroos, or they wouldn't be kangaroos. And let's see what the ancestors of kangaroos are that Frank can't look up, because it's just easier not to. I am guessing there will be ancestors to kangaroos that are known about. Kangaroos and other macropods share a common ancestor with the Phalangeridae from the Middle Miocene. This ancestor was likely arboreal and lived in the canopies of the extensive forests that covered most of Australia at that time, when the climate was much wetter and they fed on leaves and stems. Well, knock me over with a feather. Surprise, surprise. They do know what the ancestor to the kangaroos are, and here are phylogenetic trees, and you can look it up. Here they are.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to take a step back before we tackle the last few animals. And it's time for, drumroll please, our random science question of the day. And it's related to what we're talking about. And actually, you touched on it briefly earlier, the general topic I'm going to ask you about. So we know that humans are considered mammals, that we're in that category, that we have, I think you mentioned mammalian features to us.
Traits and characteristics.
Yeah. So what separates humans? Because we know from God's word, we're created in the image of God. There are no other animals that are created in the image of God. We don't believe that we are animals. We believe that we're created distinct, and yet we have features similar too. Right. So with all of that, what do you think differentiates humans from, quote, other mammals?
Yeah, well, the fact that we can appreciate art and literature.
Some people are really fucking stupid.
So we have traits and characteristics of animals and mammals, but are neither. And what makes humans unique is art. There are other species that seem to appreciate art. There are fish and birds that build fancy nests to attract mates, and many species use vocalizations to communicate and attract mates. And while they lack opposable thumbs to write it down as literature, they can and do express themselves in forms of art, and others in the species and not of the species, like humans, can and seem to appreciate it. They also communicate with each other by various means, and it wasn't that long ago that most humans, including folks in Bible stories times, could not read nor write. For a long time before that, too. Yet they appreciated art and communicated. You are a zoologist and a biologist and can't name any of the many physical attributes that makes humans their own species. You are moving up or down the rankings, however you want to look at it, as the worst scientist ever, Frank. You get an F minus minus.
The ape-like ancestors simply do not exist. The missing links are missing, and the hypothetical link between people and apes or chimpanzees is still missing. And we would maintain, according to the creation model, that that particular missing link that would supposedly cause us to diverge away from the chimpanzees and the apes and so forth, the monkeys, never will be found because it never existed.
Well, and even the ones that have been claimed there have been plenty of times that someone has claimed to have found a missing link or the missing link or something between apes and humans. And it has been either outright debunked or at least questioned every single time. And they're never going to find, like you said, they're never going to find the true missing link because something that doesn't exist is going to stay missing. You can't find it.
Humans are apes. We share genetic and morphological similarities with the great apes. We now know of more than 20 hominin species that are part of our family tree. There are human ancestors aplenty in the fossil record. You are lying, Frank. Lauren, you are lying too. There are again more than 20 hominin species that are part of our family tree. Science doesn't use missing link, as that would indicate a linear progression. Populations diverge, and populations give rise to new species, like when a new species of ape diverged and gave rise to a population of human ancestors. Lauren is lying or is woefully ignorant, and since she works for ICR, I would say it's more likely she is lying, as a simple Google search in prepping for the interview would reveal more than 20 hominin species known about that are part of our family tree. And we can look these up, and if you scroll through, you can see many hominin species and the skulls associated with them, and you can go to museums and see the skulls in the museums that are also in these phylogenetic trees. Look them up, Frank. Go to a museum.
And move on with our next amazing mammal, the humpback whale. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The humpback whale is an amazing creature. First of all, it's a mammal. Okay, it has hair and mammary glands. It gives birth to live young. And really, that is an amazing process. When the whale gives birth to its offspring there, it obviously occurs underwater. And there are nursing whales. There are whales there that act as nurses to help the mother to release the baby into the water as
That's
she
actually
gives
amazing
birth.
in and of itself that there are other nurse whales that are helping out there. That's a lot of intelligence.
That is. And so they help with the birth as much as they can. And with the flip of the tail, the baby comes out. And of course, it's a mammal, so it has to breathe. And so the baby goes up to the surface of the water and takes its first breath.
Whales are mammals because they have hair, mammary glands, and give live birth, just like humans do, that are mammals and are animals by the definitions Frank gives and discounts at the same time in a nonsense word salad that this whole video has been so far. An animal that can't breathe underwater is born underwater by design. Your argument for design is again terrible, Frank. It makes no sense to design an aquatic animal to not breathe with gills like fish do, nor give birth to its young underwater where they have a chance of drowning. Whales have a few hairs on their belly. For what? If they are leftovers from evolving from land animals that had hair, it makes sense of the evidence. There's no need for a whale to have a few hairs on its belly, as designed that way, when fish don't have a few hairs on their belly and can breathe underwater because they were not once land animals to ever evolve hair to protect them from the environment on land.
Evolutionists have no recourse but to say that the whales came from a land ancestor. And so, following the evolutionary narrative, they say that life supposedly began in the water, and that slowly but surely these fish-like creatures became the first amphibians. And so these fish-like creatures finally made their way out onto land and evolved from amphibians into reptiles and mammals and birds and all that. And through the millions of years, some of these mammals decided to go back into the water, okay? And so one group of evolutionists say it was like the hippopotamus ancestor that went back in the water. Others say, no, it was some other type. And
Again,
so,
it's unknown. It's a mystery.
yeah, that's it. It's a mystery. It's unknown. They're not sure.
It's all a mystery. Scientists don't know anything. Again, Frank, you should be doing this yourself, but here goes. The aquatic lifestyle of cetaceans first began in the Indian subcontinent from even-toed ungulates 50 million years ago, over a period of at least 15 million years. But a jawbone discovered in Antarctica may reduce this to 5 million years. Archaeoceti is an extinct preverter of cetacea containing ancient whales. The traditional hypothesis of cetacean evolution, first proposed by Van Valen in 1966, was that whales were related to the Mesonopsikians, an extinct order of carnivorous ungulates, hoofed animals, that resembled wolves with hooves and were a sister group of the Artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates. This hypothesis was proposed due to similarities between the unusual triangular teeth of the Mesonopsikians and those of early whales. However, molecular phylogeny data indicates that whales are very closely related to the Artiodactyls, with hippopotamuses as their closest living relatives. Because of this observation, cetaceans and hippopotamuses are placed in the same suborder. The molecular data are supported by the discovery of Pakicetus, the earliest archaeocete. The skeletons of Pakicetus show that whales did not derive directly from Mesonopsikians. Instead, they are Artiodactyls that began to take to the water soon after Artiodactyls split from Mesonopsians. That's a lot of big words. I probably messed a few of them up, but salute to the scientists that can rattle off these names like they're nothing. The earliest ancestors of all hoofed mammals were probably at least partly carnivorous or scavengers, and today's Artiodactyls and Perissodactyls became herbivores later in their evolution. Whales, however, retained their carnivorous diet because prey was more available and they needed higher caloric content in order to live as marine endotherms, warm-blooded. Mesonopsians also became specialized carnivores, but this was likely a disadvantage because large prey was uncommon. This may be why they were outcompeted by better adapted animals like the Hyinodontus and later Carnivora. And we can see by looking up the phylogenetic trees, we have plenty of evidence of whale evolution. We have many whale fossils, and these are all linked. You can look them up.
And it's really quite a stretch to say a four-legged creature lost those four legs, except for some residual legs that's found embedded into the tissues, which is a problem with evolution. They don't really get into that. But this four-legged creature would be standing millions and millions of years ago in the shallow water saying, wow, I bet the eating is better out there. And slowly began to evolve from a four-legged creature back into an aquatic creature from whence they came millions of years earlier. And so it's very much of a stretch considering all of the fossil evidence that should be there but is not there, except for some very highly questionable missing links. But again, it's even evolutionists that question some of them.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand on a certain level the fact that they're wanting to use their imaginations with that, just because it is such a unique creature. Like, it lives under the water, but it breathes air. It gives birth to its babies, just like you might see a cow giving birth to its babies. And it's a very strange situation. So I can understand they're wanting to use their imagination with that. But at the same time, like, we got to follow where the evidence leads.
It's not a stretch to say they lost their legs, Frank, when you say they have residual legs. And whale evolution is well documented in the fossil record. Whale ancestors were land animals, and yes, a food source is a great evolutionary pressure to be selected for that drove the evolution of some land animals to be aquatic ones. Frank, you are lying again. Whale evolution has an extensive fossil record. Let's look and see. And as you can see, there are many fossils of whales. They're in the phylogenetic trees. We have fossil and genetic evidence that whales were once land animals. Wow, Lauren chimes in with a real zinger. They are unique. Wow, all these different animals are unique. Brilliant, Lauren. Made by a designer that made all the species differently by design to be related looking, but not really. And yes, let's go with where the evidence leads, Lauren, like extensive whale evolution in the fossil record and linked genetically with land animals like hippos.
When you go to the American Museum of Natural History, the authorities said there in April of 2021, and I quote, "But how and when cetacean ancestors," cetacea are the whales, like the humpback whale, "cetacean ancestors became fully aquatic remains a subject of intense debate." So not just debate, but intense debate when it comes to these so-called cetacean ancestors.
Not just debate, but intense debate. Ooh, that sounds serious, Frank, and must surely disprove all of whale evolution. No, Frank. We know when whales were fully aquatic, when they lost all means to walk on land. But their ancestors, it is hard to pin down exactly when animals with limbs that they can still use on land didn't use them anymore on land, as is the case with evolution. As populations speciate, it is difficult to pinpoint an exact date, as it happens through generations across populations. So there is a time frame, not an exact date. And this is something you should have learned in biology and zoology classes, Frank. Or a Google search, checked against reputable science sources, works too.
So our next animal is a quirky little guy called the pangolin. And I know some of our very young viewers might not have even heard of this one before. It's not one that you see in children's books next to the dog and the cat and the cow and all of that. But tell us a little bit about this incredible creature.
Well, the pangolin really is quite a unique creature.
Holy smoke, Batman. Did Frank just say that pangolins are unique? Well, that settles it. That's quite the argument you have there, Frank. Different species are unique. Wow. Surely a Nobel Prize awaits you for that revelation.
But pangolins, once again, are a testimony to design. Pangolins have always been pangolins. The fossil record shows that pangolins have always been nothing but pangolins.
Pangolins have always been pangolins. Yes, Captain Obvious. Pangolins have always been pangolins. And if we look it up, what does Google have to say about the evolutionary history of the pangolins? The 8 modern species of pangolins began to diverge from their shared ancestor about 60 million years ago, which diverged from insectivores that preceded the placental mammals about 100 million years ago, when hairy animals were just beginning to replace the reigning reptilian giants. And that was before hair. See, there's hair, but there was ancestors to mammals that didn't have hair, Frank. Coalescent dating analysis suggests that pangolins diverged from their closest relatives, the carnivora, 56.8 to 67.1 million years ago, and that Malayan and Chinese pangolin species diverged from each other 4 to 17.3 million years ago. Pangolins have been described as walking pine cones, or artichokes with tails, or modern-day dinosaurs. While at first glance you might presume they are related to other ant-eating species, scientists now know one of their closest relatives is actually the mongoose.
All right, so the last animal we're going to talk about today, the last mammal, is one that you already mentioned in passing earlier as being one of the most prominent members of the mammal group. So let's talk about bats. What are some unique features of bats? How do they point us to the creator? I know the bats are kind of dividing. A lot of people love them. A lot of people get freaked out by them. They're in horror movies and things like that. So tell us a little bit about bats.
Well, bats are unique mammals.
Bats are unique, you say? Wow.
They are unique animals.
Bats are unique. Wow. That's a new argument. Or wait, no, that's the same argument using through this whole video.
Bats are designed by the creator to have sonar. There's 2 groups of bat, the mega and the microbats. The megabats do not have the sonar capability. The microbats do.
Bats were designed by your creator to have sonar, but not all bats have sonar. Bad argument, Frank. You really need to think on that one.
But where did bats come from? We say that bats were created as bats during the 6 days of creation, just thousands of years ago. One evolutionist said, and I quote, "While it is still unclear whether modern bats arose rapidly or gradually from their quadruped ancestor, 4-legged ancestor, it does seem certain that their evolution required many molecular changes to dramatically alter morphology, that is, the physical makeup, from limb to a wing." And that was said in 2008 by 2 evolutionists.
Bats are bats, says the creation model from the Bible. Bats, according to creationists that get their info from the Bible, says bats are birds. Why does the Bible say bats are birds, Frank? Leviticus 11, 13 through 19 in the NIV. These are the birds you are to regard as unclean and not eat, because they are unclean: the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, any kind of black kite, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the stork, any kind of heron, the hoopoe, and the bat.
Well, when you think about it, bats are exquisitely designed as bats, and their wings, evolutionists say, came from the front legs of some kind of rodent. But we don't find any fossils of that. There's an Eocene layer of sediments in the fossil record, and we have found approximately, and by that I mean paleontologists have found approximately 1,000 fossil bats in this Eocene layer of sediments. Guess what they are? They're all 100% fossil bats.
Bats are bats. Yes, Frank, bats are bats. The delicate skeletons of bats do not fossilize well. It is estimated that only 12% of bat genera that lived have been found in the fossil record. Most of the oldest known bat fossils were already very similar to modern microbats, the oldest known bat fossil being 52 million years ago. Based on similarities of bones and teeth, most authorities agree the bat's ancestors were probably insect-eating placental mammals, possibly living in trees, and likely the same group that gave rise to shrews and moles. Bats are not rodents, and are not even closely related to that group of mammals.
Mammals on their way to becoming bats with something that's half leg and half wing, they are 100% fossil bats.
Well, because they wouldn't have been able to survive any other way. Some of the features that you've described are so detailed. Some of these things we didn't even understand until, last century with some of the sonar stuff and all of that.
Yeah.
And all of these features are so incredibly detailed, and they had to be just right, or else that bat doesn't eat. And if that bat doesn't eat, that bat doesn't live. And all of these features have to be there just right at the same time for the bat to continue to live and reproduce and new generations to come. And not only is it not possible for evolution to have produced those features just because time and chance can't do that, but also there wouldn't have been enough time because they would have died out so soon.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
How on earth did we function? And the heart, for example, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, and particularly, don't want to be too personal, but how do I take a leak if I have to wait a few million years to do that?
Wait a minute, I don't understand.
Well, if I was to go to the toilet,
Yes.
how did we evolve with the ability to release waste? If we were waiting for certain organs to develop?
Well, no, it's not really like that.
I know it's a simple question, but I'm a simple man.
I mean, you don't wait millions of years. It all happens. There's a continual improvement going on all the time, continual changing. I mean, the way things work is different now from the way it used to be.
Yes, I repeated Richard Dawkins because this gets repeated by creationists, and this is a repeat video. So I repeated it. I do not understand what they are thinking about that there was some kind of empty shell that had no skin, no bones, no organs, and somehow this waited for organs and limbs and skin and everything to evolve. Just makes no sense. Species evolve. That does not mean the species did not have any organs or limbs. It means they evolved their organs and limbs.
One of my favorite bats, which is the South Pacific fruit bat, when you look at their dentition, their teeth, it's formidable. Their teeth are wicked. They just look terrible, and people would be led to the assumption that they must have been carnivores.
This is a moldy oldie creationist argument. It has sharp teeth, so it's a carnivore, even though it eats plants. First of all, not all bats eat plants. And second, it leaves things out, also called cherry picking. Like in many other mammals, bats are heterodonts, which means they have a dental structure composed of different types of teeth. Bats have a set of canines, incisors, and cheek teeth containing molars and premolars, which all work together in their own ways to aid the bat in crushing and grinding their food.
that bats have always been bats. Now, we don't agree, obviously, with all those millions of years. I call them Darwin years. Bats have always been bats since their creation just thousands of years ago.
Your Darwin years yuck yuck is really extra stupid, Frank, as Darwin's theory doesn't date the Earth. Geologists submit samples to labs that, using decay rate laws in physics, date the Earth to 4.5 billion years old and date the rock layers in the geologic column. Not Darwin nor his theory. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Any additional thoughts just before we wrap up?
Well, again, animals have always been animals.
You want to do repeat? Do you want to do repeat?
Some people are really fucking stupid.
And that we see their design, and when we look at the design of animals, we maintain there must be a designer. And this designer is incredibly brilliant, that would be able to design the varieties of animals to live in the various ecosystems, whether it's in the air or on land or in the sea or below this, under the sea. We find that they are all exquisitely designed to inhabit those various ecosystems. We don't attribute that to time and chance and natural processes, but to plan and purpose that we give to the Lord Jesus Christ and what he has done during the 6 days of creation.
Absolutely. No, that's such an encouragement. And even thinking about sonar with your last topic of bats, just thinking about that and the human person who came up with sonar for machines and for airplanes back in, I believe it was 1940s, might have been a little earlier than
And
that.
submarines.
And submarines. And I know you're very familiar with that, having been in the U.S. Navy. But people don't look at that sonar and say, oh, it happened. And yet they look at the same thing in the animal kingdom, and all of a sudden it's just a coincidence. So that would be such an affront to that person who came up with sonar for all of these different machines.
Lauren and Frank claim to know evolution and read about evolution and what everybody says about evolution, but I don't think they do. Not one bit. They're being dishonest. I don't think they read anything about evolution. An affront, you say, like an insult to all the people that developed sonar, but yet you have no problem insulting all the people that have given us so much data from studies and genetic information and lab research and field research about how species are all related and included in the theory of evolution. You have no problem insulting them, but don't insult the same types of scientists who develop sonar using the same methods in science. I think you have no problem insulting scientists. It's what you do. So what did we hear from Frank besides laziness, disinformation, and word salad nonsense? That's about it. Frank is dishonest. Frank peddles disinformation for ICR because he is a terrible scientist. Frank, if he had any honor at all, should be ashamed of himself. But these grifters have no honor. They only care about grifting people. And the crocodile tears that they are persecuted as Christians is not why I am addressing your bogus claims, Frank. It's because you are a degreed biologist and zoologist, and you lie about science, including biology and zoology, and other scientists and academia that fills libraries with data about evolution of species. And I find it disgusting. And I find you to be disgusting, Frank, as a dishonest person about science that has science degrees, not because of your religion. That's another issue, as your religion is horrible and riddled with barbarism, sexism, racism, bigotry, hatred, violence, and a lot of magical nonsense. But because in this video, you intentionally and willfully and under contract lie to people about fields you have studied for an easy paycheck from a dishonest organization. Does science know everything? Can it answer every question? No. While God of the Gaps doesn't explain anything, nor does it disprove scientific theories like evolution. What disproves science is new and better science, Frank, not reading from an old book of mythology written by people who had little to no understanding of the natural world, and so they attributed it to magic. The Bible is not a science book, and anyone reading the Bible to get scientific answers to anything are not firmly grounded in reality. Creationists have some kind of deep fear that if science just answers a few more things once attributed to magic that now have natural explanations thanks to science, their religions will lose believers like never before. And so goes the power they have enjoyed over people for thousands of years, and the money too. So they desperately try to sow seeds of doubt about what science knows and understands to keep folks clinging to a hope that the answer really is magic, in a magic land, with magic beings, magic spells, magic animals, magic plants, magic stars and galaxies, and one big old magic universe made of magic goo, all explained by their God did it. But not anyone else's gods, because that would be ridiculous. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think about what Frank said in the comments section. And that includes if you think I am wrong about what I said about him. Let me know either way. And remember to subscribe with a bell to catch future videos. And I hope to see you then.